What's up, it's Nick from House of Paint, and I'm going to show you how to turn the Nolzurs Stone Giant into this. Starting off on the stony flesh with a base coat of heavy blue-gray, black, and dark Prussian blue. Very little dark Prussian blue, as I just want there to be a very subtle blue accent. So it's mostly going to be about a 50-50 mix of heavy blue-gray and black with a smidge of dark Prussian blue mixed in there for a subtle effect. Next, with pure heavy blue-gray, I'm going to go across the flesh and block out the areas that I want highlighted. So this is going to be an unrefined highlight here, just picking out the areas that would be most touched by the light source. Now to smooth out those transitions, I'm going to be using a heavy blue-gray glaze. So I've added a couple drops of water to the heavy blue-gray, and I want it so that the heavy blue-gray is translucent. So test this out on your palette or test it out on your finger to make sure that you're still going to be able to see those highlights and those recesses after applying it. Now that the glaze is dry, I'm going to be using a 50-50 mix of heavy blue-gray and white, and I'm going to be applying the max highlights to the muscles and flesh. In order to create more delineation, I'm using a diluted heavy charcoal to apply to the deeper recesses, such as between the chest muscles under the arms and between the most drastic curves of the muscular figure in the legs and arms. Now with the mix of heavy sienna and heavy brown, I'm going to be applying a base coat to the giant's skirts. Following that up with some heavy gray along the fur lining of the shoulders. This is going to be an overbrush, meaning that I have wet paint on the brush, but I'm just grazing the figure to allow that texture to play its role and get that black undercoat in the recesses. Applying a mid-tone highlight to the skirts with some orange brown. This is going to be primarily an all-over coat, leaving just the base coat in the recesses under the more emphatic folds that are present on the figure. Next, I'm moving on to some heavy gold brown that I'll be applying to the upper ridges of the folds of the model. And on the back, which is away from the light source, I'll be using a dry brush of heavy gold brown to make that highlight just a little bit fainter. Overbrushing again along a smaller surface area, I'm going to be using a 50-50 mix of heavy gray and bone white. This along the fur lining of the shoulders. And for a final highlight, some pure bone white just around the tips of the shoulders and the upper crests that are closer to the light source. Also taking this moment to block out the eyes with bone white as well. And while I'm at it, a couple max highlights on the chest and leg. Layer of heavy blue-gray for the base. Picking out some individual stones with heavy brown. Once that's dry, I'll be following it up with a black wash. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to address the club with some orange brown. With the black wash dry, I'll be following it up with a dry brush of Stonewall gray. Followed by another layer of sepia wash. Last order of business when the sepia wash is dry, going over the edges with a dry brush of bone white. Back to the club with an overbrush of orange brown, and what this is doing is emphasizing the orange brown on the upper ridges of the club while that base coat settles in the recesses. The 50-50 mix of orange brown and bone white, I'll be applying a dry brush to the club. And finally, with a stiff old former dry brush, I'll be using pure bone white to add some rocky accents to the club itself. Pop the pupils in with black. And last but not least, adding some Otyugh brown onto some of these highlights on the skirts to really crisp up those highlights and make them pop. And this will be all for the Stone Giant. Really hope you enjoyed. Information on how to follow me on all my social media platforms is immediately following the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.